Well, here with the Revs and WOYK, we welcome our viewers, our listeners to a brand new series. And with our partnership through WellSpan Health, WellSpan Sports Medicine, on this program, very excited to go beyond sports and to use our platform, which is sports primarily, to get into some really important life topics. So with me is Dr. Michael Diller, licensed psychologist, also the director of the Employee Assistance Program at WellSpan. And Mike, it's great to have you on. We've had some pre-show Zoom meetings, but you and I have really been looking forward to this, and welcome. I mean, it's great to, usually we've had Revs players on the other side of this Zoom interview with me throughout the year that's been 2020, but I've really been looking forward to having you on.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, Darren. You're right. We did have a couple conversations. I think the one we're really starting today is going to be fantastic, and I look forward to being a part of that. And I feel like I feel honored to be part of the company on this side of the camera. If I'm joining kind of the lineup of the Revs and athletes, I grew up playing baseball and sports, so sports are near and dear to my heart. Although I wouldn't be able to handle too much right now, probably with curveballs and fastballs if I stepped into the batter box. It's been a while. So we'll stick to kind of what I'm probably a little bit more familiar with. But I just love the fact that we're doing this. And like you said, you said something earlier about beyond sports. I think this topic is definitely within the sports arena for sure, but it is, as life is, much beyond that. So I appreciate being here today with you.
Absolutely. Sports, and to be honest with you, this topic are a couple of the things that are some of the biggest things in my life. So it's a privilege for me to host this, and we'll get into the background of how it came about. But first of all, what is it? Well, over the next several weeks, Mike, you and I will be able to host this series on mental health awareness, so many different topics. And it is particularly important in 2020 without question. So there's no better time for us to do this, but it's also a really important topic any day, any week, any year.
Yeah. I agree, Darryl. I mean, I think 2020 has really, and the pandemic crisis COVID-19 crisis has really kind of brought it to the forefront in terms of our own emotional well-being, the stress that we feel. And sometimes people don't even realize how much stress we're under. And there's not one of us that this pandemic has not touched and impacted in a significant way in terms of creating stress. I mean, I've talked to people that have come to me and they've said, you know what, Mike, I've never experienced any kind of anxiety or depression or any kind of mental health issues ever in my life, but I'm really being stretched and I'm really being pushed and pressed in these last few months. And that's normal. I mean, it's normal to have that outside of a pandemic. The pandemic crisis and everything that's been involved really only creates the situation that could intensify that. So we're seeing that now. And I think, again, Darryl, we talked a little bit about this idea of what if we came up with this as a topic that we could kind of put on the kind of the table to be able to discuss in this way. And I think it's big, and I think it's huge. And you're absolutely right. You're spot on. Mental health, good mental health awareness, and emotional well-being has always been important. It's now even more so at the forefront. So no time like the present to be able to talk about some of the things that we'll talk about.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll start to get into kind of the personal side of my intro to this topic, and we can go from there. And
absolutely,
it's like you said, it's a very important topic. I am not ashamed to say that not just during 2020 with COVID, it's something that I battle with quite often. And there have been times where maybe the depression and anxiety is kind of in the background, and maybe there's certain symptoms, but I'm able to function through it. There's times where it comes in waves. There's times where for months at a time, it can be difficult to function. And the idea was floated to me, and I don't think a year ago I wouldn't have been able to even dream of talking about it, hosting a program like this. But, one of my favorite things is when athletes speak up on it. I think that's hugely important. Celebrities, there's so many people that have dealt with it and have spoken up on it. And I just decided, I had always wanted to get to the point where I could and could try to help make a difference for people and be open about it. And I just figured that time was now. It seemed right. So again, like for me, I've dealt with it for years and years and years, as long as I can remember, off and on. Sometimes it's no big deal at all. Sometimes it's, crippling and difficult to function. So a year ago, and we can get into some of my other, past battles and everything, but a year ago, and today's topic is our first topic is recognizing that there's a problem. And I did. And my first step was to get involved with our employee assistance program here at the Revs. And that put me in touch with the folks at WellSpan's Behavioral Health Department, Phil Haven. And every couple of weeks, Mike, ever since then, for about a year now, I've been having regular meetings with one of your outstanding therapists, Katie Eckert, who I know is going to watch this program. She was very proud of me for doing this, but it's made a huge difference for me. And we can get into some of the struggles of recognizing that and how you take that first step. But that was kind of me a year ago, and that's a huge thing that WellSpan's got. You guys have so many licensed therapists that can make a difference for somebody. You're also part of some great employee assistance programs, and I know that's part of your title. You're in charge of that.
Right. Yeah, I think at WellSpan Health, I've been very fortunate because before I joined EAP, I was a provider. So I'm still a licensed psychologist. I was a provider, part of the WellSpan Behavioral Health Network. And in 2016, Phil Haven joined WellSpan Health, and we became really within the top 10, one of the largest behavioral health entities in the country. Tremendous wealth of talent and leadership and expertise within WellSpan Phil Haven, and I've really been honored to continue to stay close and connected with them and the types of support we've been able to work together on. And you're absolutely right. You met Katie, and I know you speak very highly of her and the difference that has made. A couple things. First of all, being able to reach out and being able to get connected to someone, and then we might be talking about some of these things. That just doesn't happen like this. There's a whole kind of unfolding of just kind of steps and how someone can get there. And so that may be something that we end up kind of covering a little bit there. But yeah, we're very, the EAP program, the Employee Assistance Program, is very much dedicated to how can we find a better way to help support our fellow coworkers and recognizing that the common thread for all of us is that we're human. It doesn't speak to anything other than that in terms of some days we're just not our best selves. We have challenges, we have stressors, we have anxiety, depression. Everyone experiences those emotions, and it can just fall across a continuum of where do I fall on any given day and how much does it get in the way of my functioning every day. And you mentioned sometimes, the depression that you've experienced over years, which can happen. Absolutely. Some days it's kind of maybe a little bit on the minor side. It doesn't get in the way. You can kind of roll through that and be able to navigate that. Other times in your life, you use the word crippling, and that can absolutely happen. And it can happen to any one of us. So that's the thing that people sometimes are just like, I'm strong, I'm tough, I got this, I'm good. But you just never know one day where something may happen and unfold in one's life where you just may be less good in that particular day. And sometimes it lasts for more than just a day, and then more than a couple of days. And then it starts to, interfere with functioning. And you talked about kind of getting to that place in the beginning. How did you know that it was, you got to a point, how did I recognize when this was, this is just not good. Something's got to change. I mean, can you speak to that at all? A little bit about just kind of maybe just about just if you're comfortable doing that. I mean, I think you had shared a little bit with me when we had our kind of pre, conversations, but I think it's powerful to share that. I mean, how do you recognize this might be the time that I might need a little extra support?
Yeah, of course. And before I go down that road, sometimes it may not be one singular event that you can point to. It kind of sneaks up on you, kind of blindsides you. And another thing I would mention, some of the stigma is that it's a weakness, but it's not. Like, to me, if anything, it makes us stronger, that we're trying to function and power through this. So, for me personally, just going back to last year, well, it was, so like I said, I mean, I've had times where it's kind of in the background and I just deal with it, manage it on a daily basis. And I can look back on times where maybe I snapped at somebody or got frustrated, and that was probably a symptom of depression that I was keeping under wraps and things like that. If you Googled the symptoms, I feel like at some point in time I've dealt with about all of them, and some are worse than others, trust me. But as far as major bouts that can last for months at a time, I go back to college is the first time that I can remember that. Growing up, there were, I can point to some things where, yeah, that was probably anxiety, and I had no idea at the time. So the first major bout of depression in college, I didn't know what it was. I just knew I felt like crap. So I never got any help with that one. And it probably lasted for more than a year until I finally got myself out of it somehow. And I'm not even sure how I did. So that can happen, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's way easier to have some support. And not only do I do the regular therapy now, and when I started it, I didn't know how long it would last. I kind of figured we would probably do it for the long term, and I intend to continue it, open-ended indefinitely. But I also take some medication daily, and I've had those for several years as well. So anyway, the first time I didn't know what it was. The second time that I can remember a long bout of depression, probably 8 years ago or so, I still don't think I totally knew what it was until I was well into it, like months into it.
Yeah.
So at that point, I think it was medication and therapy. Then a few years later, I had another bout, and that time I had a little bit better idea of how to navigate it and what it actually was. But last year when I finally got involved with WellSpan through EAP, I think the thing that that jumped out to me is that, I recognize this feeling. I've felt this way before. And I think for a few weeks, I was maybe in denial of it and was hoping it would go away. And I'm thinking, a couple of things. I'm thinking, I can power through this. It's not gonna last. It can't. Like, I've been through this before. There's no way this can happen again for months on end. And then there was also a little bit of that, like, I'm afraid to admit it to people because I don't want to be like the boy that cried wolf. I've been through this before. We're really going to go through this again. This is really happening to me again. And I'm maybe thinking that people are going to assume I'm looking for attention or whatever the case. But eventually, it got to the point where it was really tough to function. I think my bout with it last year was the result of burnout, work especially. I had gotten myself kind of overstretched and just felt like there was no end in sight. And that can be one of the causes of it that we can maybe get into on a different segment. But anyway, for me personally, last year, it was just knowing what it felt like from the past. And eventually it got to the point where I felt like it was affecting my job. And certainly, my life in general. There were days that I wasn't eating until late in the day. I mean, you'd have the struggle to get out of bed. And I think that one of the things that I'm excited about, connecting with people on a different level with this is, so many people know me from the Revs and the radio, but I suspect that so many we will be able to connect with on this level as well. And last year, like, we had this great Revs team. It was so exciting. Um, on the air, we made it sound like it was so much fun, but
Yeah.
I just wasn't into it at all. I hate to say that, but I wasn't feeling like myself at all. I was almost numb, just going through the motions, trying to get through it and trying to get to the off season when I had time to really focus on fixing this problem if I could. And it's scary to think, like, there's always that fear that what if it doesn't ever get better? So back to when I felt like it was affecting my work,
Right.
every couple weeks I meet with management here at the Revs with the radio station, and we go over updates on everything. And there was one week in particular, or a couple weeks, where I felt like I hadn't made any progress, and I was pretty ashamed. And that was when I was like, okay, there's a problem here. It's affecting my mood, but also the way I interact with people, the way I'm doing my job. And I knew that my bosses here would be understanding. And that's when I first spoke to them about it. And I remembered there was a staff meeting where something about like employee assistance was mentioned. So I asked Eric Menzer, our president here, if I remembered that correctly. And he handed me a brochure that got me in touch with the folks at WellSpan. And, one of my friends who works at WellSpan was able to kind of point me in the right direction of who to get in touch with, and the rest was history. But it was really tough and it's still an ongoing battle. Like, by no means am I cured. I might be managing and battling this for the rest of my life, and I'm prepared to do that. Like, that's okay. There's millions of people that do, but that's how I recognized it. That's how I jumped into therapy. And it was scary at first, but it's now something that I truly legitimately look forward to every couple weeks. And we can talk about what a typical therapy session is like. It's maybe not all that different from what you and I are doing right now, but and it's on Zoom now, just like we are, and that's okay too. Like, it still helps. So again, Mike, I got long-winded as I often do, but that's kind of that was the path last year. And it was shortly after the season ended that I had my first appointment, and have been going regularly ever since. And Katie gives me homework every time that I'm supposed to work on to better myself. So that's kind of the way it goes.